Did you say they used to bundle vaccines into?
Yes.
Is that a bad thing? So I feel like
like 7 things in one.
that sounds really efficient.
Efficient, exactly. Except when your immune system goes haywire because it's like, dude, you're asking me to do all this shit at one time? Seriously? Together, an industry disruptor
And renowned veterinarian discuss and debate established norms and new ideas in the pet world.
This is Challenging Pet Health. I think a great topic of conversation is talking about supporting people through the steps of taking care of a new puppy or kitten.
Yeah, there's so much to cover, and I think it's easier with adult dogs talking about what to do with an adult dog than it is with a puppy sometimes.
It is. I think it's and we should do that conversation another time because I think we could really target it towards adopting an adult animal. And so that's a great conversation to have. And we'll weave some of that into today, but targeting puppies and kittens, because I get a lot of people asking about that as well. And there's some very particular, details and nuances we want to talk about. And even in my clinical practice, I actually created a 30-minute video, a little more tailored to puppies, but kittens too. And we actually send that to clients before they ever even come in the office for the exam visit, because there's, like you said, there is so much to talk about that you can't even scratch the surface of what a lot of people want to know in a typical veterinary exam visit.
Yeah, it's funny because a friend of mine just got a puppy recently, and he was sort of saying, like, what do I do? And I'm like, I actually don't even know anymore, to be honest. Because, again, some of it goes against orthodoxy, and when people buy from a breeder, they'll have like their own foods that they're being fed on, and you're like, that is a horrible dog food to be giving your animal. But then you also don't want to like overload people with things. So it's really hard. And look, just from a formulation aspect, I used to sell this brand of dog food years ago, and the only difference between the adult dog food and the puppy one was they used to just add egg.
Interesting.
It was a wet meat product, and I used to sell loads of it. But it was like literally, I remember when we did run out of the puppy version, I was like people are like, who've got puppies want this product, and they're like, just tell them to add egg. That's all we do.
Yeah.
We literally just add egg to the normal product.
Makes sense from a nutritional standpoint because egg is such a good thing for growth. I mean, eggs were so that the baby neonate chicken could grow with those nutrients. So that actually makes sense. But obviously, diet companies would be putting higher levels of protein and fats and, certain amino acids and things that puppies need to grow, and other certain, minerals and vitamins, etc. But food is always a perfect discussion to start out with, because supporting pet parents to start them off on the right foot so that we start in a preventative, health supportive manner, and diet's the number one factor pretty much in that conversation.
More so with kittens as well. I'm slightly obsessed by how many cats get like kidney problems from being dehydrated, and a lot of that's down to kibble feeding, in my opinion.
Indeed.
And like, that's not me saying kibble feeding bad, whatever, but it's like cats don't have a natural thirst drive. So if you're feeding, like in the wild, a cat would get its moisture from prey animals. And so if you're starting it off on a kibble-fed diet, it can be very hard to transition it onto something else, because cats aren't like dogs. Dogs are easy enough to transition from whatever diet you've got to a new diet. Cats can become quite routinely stuck in certain diet types.
They can be more finicky or selective compared to the average dog, certainly. And you are 100% correct that feeding dry food, certainly lifelong for a cat, is absolutely causing issues. When dogs eat kibble, they will go slurp down a bunch of water to make up for being on a dry food. Most of them. Some small breed dogs don't do that as much as large breeds, but inherently most cats will not. And they are spending their lives dehydrated, anywhere from borderline dehydrated to true dehydrated. And it's certainly causing a lot of bladder problems, crystals, stones, kidney failure as they get older, etc. So certainly in the food discussion, quality of food, what to do for puppies and kittens, but I love that you hit on right away in the conversation is moisture in the food, especially for cats, is critical importance. And so when you start them out on dry, there are a lot of addictive things on a lot of the kibbles. They spray them with the Animal Digest and the things that are really tasty. And like you said, it can be hard to convert them over to other options once they get in that dry food pattern.
I'm always like really like nervous around marketing language because again, like I just said, like you got a dog food and it's just basically adult dog food and they add egg in, which okay, it's better than the normal, right? But like that growth phase is so important, and like a poor growth phase, like when you've got like a young animal, if they're not getting what they need, they'll have lifelong issues off the back of that.
Exactly. Like starting them off right from the get-go, you can't understate the value of that. Because, yeah, you're starting at a deficit. If you have nutrient deficiencies from the start, you did talk about how a lot of puppies will be sent home from the breeder with the food or perhaps a shelter if people are, rescuing, adopting. There's something to be said for having a little slow, transition time of taking them on what they've been previously eating, but then supporting pet parents to start transitioning, combining in other less processed forms of food, low processed or fresh versus the typical ultra processed kibble.
So what do you look for in the food? Like, so, because I feel like nutrition is one of those things that actually genuinely does my head in at this point. But I think like the problem is obviously, people work to budgets. They need to there's an element of convenience involved because again, if you're feeding a frozen food, you need a lot of space, especially if you've got like a larger breed dog. That's gonna eat a hell of a lot of food. So like, what would you say your main guides are in terms of like if I've just brought home a puppy or a kitten, like what are you looking for really?
My goals to support people would be to say limit or omit at some point, if possible, ultra processed food. So we know most people are on a budget. So there are, variances within different formats of food as far as cost, but most people can at least include some low processed and some fresh food in the diet. Like even toppers, and there are a lot of veterinary experts that say, adding 10% fresh food into a bowl of kibble goes an extraordinary long way than nothing at all. And so even just adding some toppers, and I love to tell people I'm not a all one format of food or it's all or nothing. There's different variations of things that we can do and slowly step into stuff, baby step into stuff. But if we can move away from heavily, meaning high heated, when anything goes through extreme heat and pressure, which is the extrusion method is the standard, not only are nutrients damaged and therefore not bioavailable, so you're getting less nutrition out of something heavily processed. But frankly, anything that's heated to that extreme is also more inflammatory to the body. So now you're eating more pro-inflammatory. So my goal for everyone is always to move toward low processed or fresh, and even just adding some in the diet is better than none.
When you say fresh, what like you're talking about like raw or like gently cooked? Because again, like because when you've got, let's say, because some people might take fresh as some of the tins or like some of the shelf stable products.
Okay.
And like from my experience, some of the tins and shelf stable products, they need to use like emulsifiers.
Yeah.
Which binds the proteins and fats together and essentially makes it something else. So we're talking about like even if you only like use like a small amount of raw or a small amount of something gently cooked, it's about putting something.
That's the fresh.
Yeah, that's the whole.
That's
food.
how I would define it as well.
Yeah.
Gently cooked or raw. And raw, obviously, we want a decent amount of protein in their diet. That's always a big topic of the discussion. But even raw in like a couple blueberries, like we could be talking some fruits and a little bit of veggie, et cetera. But certainly, the proteins, whether it's a raw or gently cooked egg or some meat, et cetera, there's all kinds of toppers that can be used.
So let's say like I'm on a budget and I'm using like sort of 10, 20%, like let's say a fresh food, whether that be raw or gently cooked. Mm-hmm. Like the rest of the does it need to be something marketed as a puppy or kitten food? My issue is that obviously with like the marketing spin, it, like I say, just add an egg and that's your puppy food.
Right.
So, and again,
I think a lot of it is marketing. However, there's probably some differences depending on the breed and the size of the dog. So a small breed dog that's not going to grow a lot, as far as size, that can make a big difference. But a large breed or a giant breed dog that has a lot of growth can have very different requirements. Interestingly, though, a lot of large breed puppy foods that are marketed for that are designed to sort of slow the growth rate so they don't have a huge, fast growth spurt, because that can lend to more joint problems and cartilage problems if they grow too fast. So, that's sometimes obviously calculated into some of these foods, but I don't think it's ultra, and I don't develop food. So to say with some caveat, I don't think it's ultra important to have really specifics, to that degree in the type of food that you feed. I would be going more towards high quality, low processed, correct volumes of food, that we're feeding. And just to define low processed, so everyone has a little clarity around that, things that aren't ultra processed or heavily heated. Different formats of food can be freeze-dried, dehydrated, air-dried, et cetera. So there's all kinds of formats of food that are...
But then, I think it's like when we talk about, let's say, the larger dogs, things like bone broth then become important because, again, you've got speed of growth in the joints and that sort of stuff.
And supporting them with those nutrients is huge.
Mm-hmm. But actually, when you've got a puppy, this is the ultimate time to act proactively because a little doing the right thing at the beginning means that you're going to not have those problems down the line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other topics that, really play into the puppy and kitten conversation, tons of people want to know about what to do with vaccines. And so when I, support pet parents, certainly from an integrative approach, a big part of the discussion for both dogs and cats is to minimize vaccinations, not to over-vaccinate, when to start them, separating multiple vaccines to not be done at the exact same time on the same day, administering multiple at the same time. And then very thoughtfully through adult life, minimizing to what is appropriate for their region, their lifestyle, their own individual risks, and not just to blanketly vaccinate just because we can.
Yeah, and but it's important to realize there is vaccine hesitancy and tinfoil hat merchants where they're just all vaccines are horrendous. Do you know what I mean? And it's sort of it's about my thing with vaccines is you don't take headache medication for a headache you might have tomorrow. But at the same time, with vaccinations, there are certain things which are just dangerous not to have vaccines for, right? So
there are, and so to really speak to that in sort of an easy way, at least, and I'm pretty sure this may be the World Small Animal, but definitely World Small Animal Veterinary Association, but definitely at least in the U.S., the core vaccines for a dog are considered parvo, distemper, and rabies. Those are the three core. So those would be the life-threatening, big diseases that we really want to prevent. And quite frankly, those three vaccines are good vaccines, meaning they have a high rate of efficacy. There are a lot of other optional vaccines that are not core vaccines that people should really pay more attention to as far as decision-making around that. Does my pet really need this? What is the efficacy rate of this vaccine, et cetera? So there are a lot of other ones that simply may not be needed and are just overused because that's just kind of the way protocols go. So as far as getting puppies and kittens started, most breeders, unfortunately, will start them too early at even 5 or 6 weeks of age. There's a lot of scientific data, published data, to show that maternal antibody, which will block a vaccine, meaning maternal antibody is what the mom gives to the puppy or kitten through the placenta or the mammary glands through the milk. They're gaining antibodies from mom to help support them to fight off things early in life before they've had the chance to create their own immunity. And so the thing is, they're born essentially, and as neonates acquire immunity from mom, and that will block a vaccine. So a vaccine is trying to trigger the body to create its own antibodies to protect itself in the future if it faces that virus. But if maternal antibody is already on board, then the body's like, I don't need to spend energy creating an antibody that I already got some. So the whole point of not starting them too soon is that when you give a vaccine with maternal antibody on board, you are potentially offering a risk to the body of stimulating it immunologically for something that isn't going to help it. So you're taking on risk with no reward.
When should they be started?
So a lot of integrative vets that have studied this, Dr. Jean Dodds, one of them, one of the premier, Dr. Ron Schultz, who was actually my immunologist at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. And he was actually preaching to us in the early 90s that the veterinary field overall we're over vaccinating. And he said, we haven't caught up with the studies yet, but, mark my word, we'll get there over the years, but it'll take some time. Dr. Jean Dodds has been a big proponent of this too, as a big, immunologist. She's also endocrinology. And they have established recommended minimal vaccine protocols that are still considered very safe and, efficacious for the pet, but not overdoing it and, having protocols that could lead to compromise. And so it is recommended to start at 8 to 10 weeks. 9 to 10 weeks, right in there, rather than 5 to 6.
Well, we in the UK we do 8 weeks and 12 weeks is normally what we do.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yep.
like no, I don't think anybody does it before 8 weeks, and it's supposed to be. You do it at 8 weeks, and I think maybe 10 or 12 weeks afterwards. But I know some people push it to 9 or 10 weeks.
Okay, which is great. Right in there is what I like to recommend, and it is standardly done here much sooner.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And so that can cause some immunocompromise without the reward. As far as maternal antibody, then the whole puppy or kitten series that's coming after that with the vaccinations, the typical protocols, at least in the US, is you do the first vaccine, whether that's done at 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And then 3 to 4, sometimes they even shorten it, 2 to 4 weeks later, you keep boosting them until they're at least 16 weeks of age. Some people even go through 18 or 20 weeks. And you keep boosting them at windows of 2, 3, 4 weeks until they are beyond 16 weeks. And the whole premises of that is that maternal antibody will fade naturally, but you don't know when it's going to fade for each individual. So you could have a litter of 6 puppies. 2 puppies could lose maternal antibody at 10 weeks, 2 could lose at 11 weeks, 2 could lose at 12 or 13 weeks. But we know that maternal antibody will be gone by 15 weeks. So that's why if we're going to test them, by the way, with a titer test to see if they have immunity, we always wait till after 15 weeks if we've been vaccinating them and people want to be minimalist with vaccines. You can do an antibody titer blood test to check if that puppy or kitten has antibodies after 15 weeks of age. If measurable antibodies are coming up, they have their own antibodies, and those are not moms because moms are gone. But the reason the 16 week is considered the end of the series or something beyond that is because we know maternal antibody is gone by 15 weeks. So that vaccine after that time should take effect and support that pet's body to make their own antibodies. They're on forward.
So what vaccines would you recommend? Because we've had a lot of in the UK. There's been a lot of people kicking off about, is it Lepto4?
Leptospirosis.
Yeah, so it's one of the there's one leptospirosis vaccine.
Okay.
And I don't know a lot about it, if I'm honest. I just know there's people saying that it's caused real problems in some dogs. I think it's Lep4 or something like that.
Okay, and I don't know what the 4 is for, but I'm sure, that's within the bacterial group of leptospirosis. And the thing with lepto is that it is recognized as one of the vaccines, or it could be a portion of a multiple way. They used to do a 5-way or 6 or 7-way vaccine, which has distemper and parvo and coronavirus and lepto and all this stuff in one, which I never would advocate for. And we know so much more now than we did decades ago that separating those out is so much safer on the immune system. But a lot of veterinarians in the US for decades took out lepto because it was the most problematic in causing reactions for dogs. More represented in small breeds than large breeds, but definitely across the board, lepto caused more reactions than all of the other vaccines. And so a lot of people were taking it out because there are a lot of regions that never see lepto or very, very minimally. It's just not a high risk. Distemper and parvo are hardy viruses. They're out there. There's so much exposure. But lepto is honestly, it's a bacterial disease. It's a treatable disease. Unless you get to it in super advanced stages, it is very treatable. It responds to doxycycline or tetracycline class of antibiotics. And because it's a bacterial disease, the vaccine doesn't last for a long time, a duration of immunity like viral vaccines typically do. And so you got to boost a lot more often.
Doesn't it come from like drinking like
Wildlife and water reservoirs.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like water reservoirs.
Lakes, ponds, definitely from wildlife, and it can be transmitted through urine.
Yeah.
If a dog does get it, they can get febrile, lethargic, bloody urine, etc. So a lot of veterinarians are used to, if there's those kinds of symptoms, they would test for lepto. It's easily tested for as well.
Did you say they used to bundle vaccines into?
Yes.
Is that a bad thing? So I feel like
like 7 things in one.
That sounds really efficient.
Efficient, exactly. Except when your immune system goes haywire, because it's like, dude, you're asking me to do all this shit at one time? Seriously? Also, when you do integrative, people tend to call it combo wombo, vaccine, where there's all this, going on in one vaccine. If the pet has a reaction to it, so many things were given, you don't even know what the reaction was to. So even if you wanted to be more sensible in the future for that pet and avoid certain things that might have triggered them, you don't even know what it was because there were 7 things in that vaccine.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother issue.
Do they still do that though? Do they still like give?
Not as much. It's not standard like it used to be, but there are still some veterinarians who are, and there are some veterinarians that are including things in that have been established to just not be necessary, like coronavirus. It's a subclinical, disease state. It just doesn't even really produce symptoms, and it's so young. It only affects the puppies in, very young ages, like below 8 weeks. By the time you vaccinate for it, it's literally not even a problem for them anymore. So again, that's an easy one to cross off the list.
Yeah.
There's a lot canine flu, usually not necessary and not recommended by a lot of leading authority immunologists. The other thing, though, that I do want to bring up is the ability to use supportive tools after a vaccination to help the body adjust after the vaccine too. And so in my own line, I have a line of products that are homeopathic, Dr. Katie's Remedies. I have a dental product too. But most of my products to date are homeopathy remedies. And those really shine as a tool to give after an immune challenge to help support the body in eliminating, some of the adjuvants and chemicals and things that are in the vaccine that might continue to trigger the immune system, and, remedies that help the lymphatic system to drain and, just to support immune balance. So that's a lovely thing to do after a needed vaccine.
And it's safe to use alongside anything and at any age as well, isn't it?
Yes.
I think that's the thing with puppies is like everybody's obsessed with like, is this suitable for puppies?
Yes. And so homeopathy can be used in all ages, all species. Chickens, emus.
The emus, yeah.
Emus and his family.
Yeah.
But literally all species. And as you mentioned, there's no interference of homeopathy with anything else.
You're sort of saying there's like 3 different vaccines which you definitely should get, and then the rest are kind of optional after that?
For the most part.
Yeah.
Pretty good summary.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then...
But what I was going to say is like, well, I'm not being flippant. The problem is like when you go to vets, and like, especially a lot of vets are corporate vets, and they
more and more corporate medicine is coming.
People have a deference to vets. So like when you go and you say, well, actually, I don't want to get like your combo wombo injection. I want to like break it into like different constituent parts. Mm-hmm. They go, well, I'm wearing a green jacket, so combo wombo it is, or kind of get out of my surgery. And they're kind of a bit like that, to be honest. They kind of say, well, no, I went to veterinary college, and my overlords tell me this is why I have to sell. So how do you kind of deal with that as like a normal member of the public?
Yeah, and that's a really good segue into supporting people who are getting new pets into choosing their primary veterinarian. Their supportive veterinarian, that's literally part of your pet's healthcare team. You want to choose wisely and, really have a little bit of intention in the process of choosing a vet. And not everybody has access, perhaps, in their local region to an integrative veterinarian, but many integrative veterinarians practice primary practice. They're there as a regular vet, but they also have an integrative or holistic focus. So you're getting the best of both worlds. There are some holistic veterinarians that don't do everything that a primary vet does, like myself in my practice. I don't do full service practice before. I used to do surgeries and dentals and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm much more focused. So I like to tell people, at least if they're seeing someone like me, select a primary vet who you like that, is good to work with. And then, tap into your holistic or integrative vet for, those needs and those services. But for some people, it's just, finding that one entity that can support them best.
But I do think with people with vets, they sometimes look at them like they are a specialist on everything for whatever reason. And I think that like actually just being a little bit more questioning and actually like preloading yourself so you actually know as much as you can. So when you walk in and they've got the combo wombo out, you're like, absolutely not.
Right. And you can ask respectfully and, you can have the respectful boundaries of, hey, this is, what I've learned and this is what, the angle I want for my pet. And I love to support people to be the best advocate for their pet. So people need to remember that they are the parent, that they are the pet parent. It's like, with your human child, if you are not their strongest and best and most informed advocate, who's going to be, and it's good to select a veterinarian you feel good working with to the best of your ability. But it's also really important to know that pet parents very much have an important and significant role in decision-making for their pets.
For me personally, like I've got at least one dog that wouldn't be here today if I wasn't able to push back against my vet because they they just wanted to put her down, even though I knew she
Right. And what a beautiful story. Yeah. And the influence that gave you clearly has come out in your work and sharing things with other people. Yeah. And so that in and of itself leaves a legacy for other people to gain from, which is a beautiful thing.
Right. So what's next? What else do we need to know about puppies?
All right. Spay and neuter would be another thing. And we can have a whole episode on that because the whole endocrine system, spay and neuter thing is a huge spot of focus.
Let's just do top line though, because I think like ideas are changing on it. Because like it was like people were like literally like neutering at like crazy young ages.
Oh yeah.
To be honest.
I was a shelter vet. Yeah. I did for years from the late 90s to 2005 and even beyond. And then I was still a shelter vet after that, but not full time. I mean, I did like 30 spays and neuters a day. And that was before we understood the ramifications of doing it so young because but by U.S. requirements in shelters and local and state laws and such, pets have to be spayed and neutered before they can be adopted out, which you can understand from the over pet population angle of things and the concern of homeless pets being euthanized, that obviously the spaying and neutering before they're adopted had a basis, a sensible basis to it. But strictly from the health standpoint of that individual animal, now we know far different that is not serving their health well. And not only are they linking, cancers, but also joint and ligament problems, ACL ruptures, and all the way up to literally just chronic inflammation. And there's just been huge discussions from a lot of, prominent integrative veterinarians, Dr. Karen Becker, Dr. Peter DeBias, big discussions. Even conventional veterinarians are starting to, the trend is to recommend that people wait. But definitely in the integrative space, we're telling people to wait at least until they're mature, 12 to 18 months for a small breed dog, 18 to 24 months for a large breed dog, but considering keeping them intact lifetime.
Yeah.
It's my understanding in Europe, a lot of people keep their pets intact. I think it's a very different lifestyle trend than in the U.S.
Yeah, no, it is. I would say like cats are different because again, like in Europe, there's a lot more people that let their cats out.
Yeah. And it is good to bring up that cats are very different because they cycle differently. And a lot of the data that's being demonstrated about issues with dogs that are spayed and neutered early have not been found in cats. So even a lot of the advocates for leaving them intact would err more on spaying and neutering of cats after they're mature. That would
Yeah.
still be our goal. But not necessarily leaving them intact lifelong the way that we are really trying to, encourage people to do for dogs.
But I think where cats also are people, like there's still a sizable percentage of cat owners that let their cats just go off and go toilet in other people's gardens and get other cats pregnant and stuff. There's kind of that thing where it's kind of like, probably don't let your cat go around intact.
Exactly.
Right. So what else have we got?
What to do about flea and tick control, especially people that are interested in a more natural approach and wanting to avoid and minimize chemicals going into their bodies or on their bodies all the time. And that is a really good goal because the cumulative effects of toxins throughout the life of a pet or anybody, a human in today's world is a lot. And just, you can't think of, I'm just putting it on them now. It's next month and next month and next month. And even one dose alone could, of course, create an adverse event or a reaction. But what I really like to promote and recommend is intentional use of things and obviously efforts to minimize the number of chemicals in their lives. I'm not an all or nothing. I'm not going to sit on a soapbox and say never, ever, ever, use a flea chemical product. But I certainly like to support people to exhaust all natural means first, tap into all your natural things, your essential oil-based flea and tick products, diatomaceous earth, all of those types of strategies that can be employed before you turn to a chemical and not just blanketly giving them something every month just because we can and call that prevention. When we are addressing fleas and ticks and trying to prevent or get rid of them, a layered approach is always a sensible thing, meaning it's just as important to treat your environment, meaning your house, as it is to address the pet because more fleas are living in the environment than on the pet. And they get a blood meal and they jump off and they go lay 1,000 eggs. And then there's, hundreds of them laying thousands and thousands of eggs. And so it's really important to address the environment, or once you treat your pet, they just all still have to jump on the pet to get the...
Well, we used to see two bursts in sales. We used to see the sales during the summer. And then obviously the UK is cold. And we also used to see a burst in October-ish when everyone used to turn their heating on because it would heat all the eggs up. And then their pets would get covered in the fleas off the eggs.
Yeah.
So there was the two bursts.
And then the other, piece of the conversation that I love to share everybody with the knowledge we have now is that the new oral pills, the newer generation of stuff, lots of brands, in the US that fit this. We thought, we're cleaner, simpler, you're not putting chemicals on them, but they're swallowing these, ingesting these, and they are getting systemic, meaning through the body, toxins in their system. And for most of these new, pill type products, the oral products, there's a neurotoxin. These are neurotoxins that are getting, into the bloodstream of the pet, and the flea or tick has to bite, get a toxic blood meal to die. And so a lot of pets are getting neurologic problems. And there can be other issues like, liver disease and liver failure, but there's certainly, seizures and neurologic stuff and ataxia and wobbling and, even up to fatal. But point being is there's a lot more adverse events and more severe adverse events with the oral pills than there ever was with all the topicals. So a lot of integrative, natural, holistic veterinarians such as myself are steering people always using natural products first as your first option, but steering people back toward some of the topicals that are seen to be safer as opposed to just...
Is it certain types of year you'd put it on, or would you just do it if you saw a problem? Or
I like to be selective to if people see a problem.
Okay.
During the seasons of the year in your area, anybody's individual area where there may be fleas or ticks. Now ticks are a big deal too. So ticks carry tick-borne diseases. Like that's a whole nother thing that, is a significant issue. Fleas are no fun to deal with, and can cause a lot of problems, but they don't carry, significant diseases like ticks. So if people are in a tick endemic region, or there's times of the year where they're going out with their dogs and hiking and doing stuff where there's exposure, I would be more apt to use a product, although there are some natural things that, of course, can be used there too. But to answer your question more directly, I would minimize, depending on their lifestyle, the season, and their risk rate. Yeah. And so I would only use it really when you need to. So I think that's a really good thing to talk about.